What's up, YouTube? I'm Trent Wel-Don with Wel-Don Aquatics. It's time to get water in this tank. Alright guys, welcome back. It is finally time to get water in this tank. It has been empty way too long. So let's run through the filtration, show you how I hot rod that, and we're gonna get water in this tank today, so stick around. One of the first things we're gonna do is we're gonna change up the filtration. This is what it comes with. Basically, in essence, 2 filter pads full of carbon. Now, here's my thought on these filter pads. It's a way for big box stores to get you to buy their filters when you have to change. They say to change this out, weekly, monthly, garbage. So what we're gonna do, and remember, everything came from Petsmart, and we're staying in this $100 budget. Fluval Aqua Clear. This is the sponge that goes in the Fluval Aqua Clear, and this is a 3-pack. They come in this size, that thickness, but I cut it down to about half the thickness and roughly about half the length of it to make it so it's going to fit back in this filter area. So what I'm going to do is right where the intake is, I'm going to slide this right behind there, so when the water gets pulled in, it has to go through the sponge first. That's also going to help keep any sand out. Now the next thing we need, so that's what we call our mechanical filtration. Mechanical filtration is going to stop any small particles coming through. It's going to catch a lot of the debris, but it's also an area for beneficial bacteria to grow on, so it's helping us in many ways. So next we're going to add our biological media. I went with the Fluval Aqua Clear ceramic media. It's a 1-piece. It's rated for their Aqua Clear 30, so it's the smallest bag of media that I could get, and I needed it to be small so I could fit it back here. And this is all it is. Little ceramic cylinders, but what I like is it came in this mesh bag, so that way when I need to clean this, I can just pull that bag out and rinse the bag instead of having to pick out little pieces. So we're going to take this mesh bag, and that is going to slide right on top of the piece of foam, the sponge we just put in. So we're just going to take this. Sometimes these will come dusty. You can rinse it off in tap water. It's not going to hurt anything. We're just going to slide this right behind and lay it right on top of the sponge. So now what happens, water is going to come in the intake, flow through the sponge, has to flow up through the media, and that's another high area for beneficial bacteria to grow on. So now we have just hot rodded this filter because this will sustain more of a bio load than it ever would have initially. We now have an awesome 5-gallon tank, and we're still in that $100 budget. Next thing I needed to heat this tank. Some fish can stay in unheated tanks, but the fish that I'm thinking of keeping in here, I've kind of dabbled with them, and I needed this tank to be heated at least to 78 degrees. So this was a challenge. I got the Tetra H10 submersible heater. This is a 50-watt heater. They say it's rated anywhere from 2 to 10 gallons. This is the exact heater I'm using in my guppy tank right now. It's a little bigger profile than I like, but it's going to work for this tank. Now, it was hard. This ate up probably a fourth of the budget. Remember, we're only on a $100 budget. So this is the size of the heater. There's my hand for comparison. It's really about as long as my hand is. But what I found is if you slip off the suction cup that comes with this, you can actually get this to fit behind here. It kind of turns sideways, kind of finicky back there. And that's not going to harm anything. So now that heater is hidden out of the main display, so we still have a nice crisp display in this tank. Now what's going to happen, water comes in, flow through the sponge, flow through the ceramic media like we talked about, but now before it gets returned back into the tank, it's also going to get heated in this back chamber. That's going to really increase the rate of heat that's going to be transferred through this aquarium. Remember that gyre we talked about as it flows through the nozzle? That is going to give us a more consistent heating element throughout this tank and really benefit the fish in this tank. So guys, that's it. That's how simple it is to hot rod this filter. That's why this little tank is such a good find. Alright guys, let's get water in this tank. I'm going to show you how to put water in it without fully disturbing this entire sand bed. And then we're going to talk about the products we're going to use to seed this tank with beneficial bacteria. So stick around. Now, space was something that was difficult, especially in my fish room right now, making a few changes. So I was actually able to kind of push my cords out of the way and find a little spot underneath my 75-gallon next to the sump to house this 5-gallon tank temporarily until I can figure something else out. Alright guys, we're going to officially get water in this tank. So what we're doing is I've added a bowl, it's just a paper bowl into this tank. And what that's going to do is as I add water into this tank, instead of stirring all the sand up, it's going to dump on the bowl, and that bowl will float, should theoretically float as water is added. But here's how we're going to do it. We're going to start a siphon. I've got a 5-gallon bucket next to me. It's on a stand. It's higher than the tank, so I can start a siphon and siphon water from the bucket to the tank. That way I can control the speed at which it's added. See, so even though that water is pouring over the bowl there, and that bowl may not float because of that plastic piece of driftwood, it's still coming in at such a slow rate that it's not going to disturb the sand to where it just blackens the water. Now there is going to be some dust coming off of this sand, so we'll have to do a few water changes the next coming days to really get this tank to clear up. But that's it guys, this is a perfect way to add water to a tank, especially with sand, is if you can start some kind of siphon or run your water change system to the tank and then use something to divert that water, you're not going to disturb any plants or any substrate that you have in the tank. Alright guys, and there it is. So I'm actually pretty happy with how this turned out. I like that the water level is maybe about 1 inch from the top. It's going to allow for some good surface agitation from the nozzle on the back. But it also allows, if a fish jumps, it's not going to kill itself when it hits the lid. That way the lid's not touching any water. And one thing we talked about was water changes on this tank. So because it's so low, you may be thinking how I'm going to get a siphon to start off of this, especially when usually, the siphon works off of pressure and gravity. I'll be able to siphon a little bit of water out of this, and because it's only 5 gallons, a 1 gallon water change is actually a large volume water change on such a small system. So that's something I took in consideration when I decided to place the tank right here. So now we're going to get going into how we're going to cycle this tank and talk about how we're going to seed this with beneficial bacteria. Alright guys, before we get going on that, I'm going to add the plants to this tank. So this is a dwarf Sagittaria. This will spread over time, and what's nice is I was able to actually break it up into 2 plants, so this will give us a little more coverage. So now planting this, we'll put one kind of back here. All I'm going to do is make sure that the roots are buried in and covered on sand. This is a heavy root feeder plant, but I also need the sand to hold this plant in place. And you can see some air bubbles coming out of that sand. That's another good thing to do is once you add like a sand substrate, give it a couple days at least to release some of that gas trapped in that sand. That's a lot of bubbles coming out of that sand. So that's something we want to release over time. That's what's going to happen is that you're going to get buildup of toxic gas that will kill your fish. The thing we're going to do is we're going to dechlorinate this water. Now in my city, I only have chlorine that's put in. I don't have any chloramines. If I had chloramines, we'd have to do something different, but since I don't, I'm just going to use a generic water conditioner. This is the Top Fin water conditioner that I got from Petsmart. Now this little bottle says it'll treat over 1,000 gallons of water. So let's go ahead and add this to the tank. Now what I like about this is that this little bottle comes with the measuring cap. So the cap right on top of the bottle is a nice has a nice measuring system on there for easy access. So we're just gonna dump that right in. That's all we gotta do with that. That simple, that quick. And when we get the pump going, that'll turn that over in the tank and really dechlorinate that water for us. So now let's talk about bacteria. There's a couple ways to cycle this tank. I could add live fish to this tank and hope that they survive the spike of ammonia they're gonna bring, or we can do it properly and give the new fish the best chance of survival in this tank. Something that I've had success with is adding a bacteria supplement that comes out of a bottle. So this is the Top Fin bacteria supplement. Again, it says it treats up to 470 gallons of water. Now they say that because you can actually, as you do a water change, you can add this back in to help keep your system going. But what we're seeking to do with this is we are seeking to season the tank. Think of a cast iron skillet. You cook bacon in there 50 times and then cook a piece of chicken in there, that piece of chicken is going to taste so good. Now an aquarium, if we add some bacteria, some of this bacteria is going to take over that biological media, the ceramic media that we added, and that's going to start processing ammonia. It's going to start processing nitrate. Now there's not a lot of nitrate and ammonia in there, but if we dose this consistently, let's say a couple days, a week, 2 weeks, give it a little bit of time to establish, once we add fish in, the fish are going to produce that ammonia. And that's when the bacteria can really get to work, but they already have a head start because they're already in the tank. So let's go ahead and add this in. To be honest with you, when I dose beneficial bacteria, I kind of ignore the instructions. You can never have too much bacteria. Some of this is going to die off, and once that bacteria dies off and doesn't establish, that'll add untraceable amounts of ammonia to any test kit, but it's going to allow the living bacteria to feed off of that. So I'm probably going to add in a full dose of 10 milliliters to this tank to start with. I'll let that run for maybe a day or two, and then I might come back and add another dose just so we can keep this up. And that's it, guys. That's how we are going to properly cycle and seed this tank with beneficial bacteria. So when we stock this in a future video, the fish are going to be healthy and alive. So now that we've got plants in, we got the substrate in, we got the decor in, filters up and ready to go, it's time to get that filter running, get the light on, and let's see how that reacts to everything. Alright guys, here is the final product. The Petsmart 5-gallon tank is up and running. We officially have water, and we are cycling the tank with that beneficial bacteria. As you can see, it's a sleek design. Will look great on a desk. I got the cords to fit with that heater back there and the pump with the cover. The cover is that filter, glass lid's on, and you can just look how bright that light is. I think this tank turned out fantastic. So that light is so bright that this little dwarf Sagittaria isn't going to have a hard time growing at all. So a couple things I've noticed off the bat is that this sand tends to clump up together. I hope that'll go down as it releases air. I've never had sand hold that much air before, so I'm gonna let this tank run for quite a while before I add fish in, just to properly get that air released. Guys, overall, I am pleased with this tank, and we still have about $10 in the budget left to go get fish for this tank. So if you want to see this build finished off and to find out what we stock in this tank, hit that subscribe button and let's follow this together and finish this off. So guys, stay tuned until next time. One last thing I forgot to mention about this Petsmart tank. This thing is silent. Everything you're hearing in the background, that's all my other tanks. I can't hear the pump running on this tank. This would make for an excellent bedroom tank, office tank, kitchen tank. Possibilities are endless.